What if I told you that the time you wasted was never wasted at all? In a world that pushes us to hustle, achieve, and constantly move forward, we often forget the beauty of stillness, the power of presence, and the quiet magic hidden in the moments we overlook. This video isn't about productivity. It's about poetry. It's about memory. It's about feeling life fully, even in the seconds that don't make it to your calendar. If you've ever wished you could turn back time, not to change it, but to waste it better, this is for you. Take a deep breath, slow down, and come with me. Let's remember what truly matters. If you could turn back time, waste it. Not in the careless, mindless way we often associate with wasting time, but in the most beautifully rebellious, soul-satisfying way possible, where every second is lived not for some grand purpose, but for the quiet joy of just being, wasted by walking without destination through the streets of your childhood, where your feet remember the cracks in the pavement better than your mind remembers the math you struggled to learn. Wasted lying in the grass, under a sky that doesn't demand anything of you, watching clouds drift like lazy thoughts without purpose, without destination, just like you in that moment. Wasted sitting at the dinner table a little longer, listening to your grandmother's stories you once ignored, letting her words sink into the cracks of your memory and settle there like seeds, blooming later when you least expect it. Wasted writing poems you'll never share, doodling in the margins of your notebooks like a teenager, convinced the world doesn't understand because maybe it doesn't, and maybe that's okay. Wasted in long phone calls with old friends you've grown apart from, letting the silence between your words stretch without apology, without the urgency to fill it with something meaningful. Because sometimes the silence itself is the meaning. Wasted rereading the same book 10 times, even if you already know how it ends, simply because the way it makes you feel is something you can't explain and don't need to. Wasted by making mistakes slowly, learning nothing from them for a while. Because growth isn't always efficient and healing isn't always immediate. And that's a truth no one tells you until it's too late. Wasted by loving someone who doesn't love you back. Because there's beauty in the raw ache of unreturned affection, in the way it proves you're still capable of feeling deeply in a world that sometimes numbs you. Wasted chasing dreams that don't make sense to anyone else. Staying up late sketching blueprints for a life no one believes in. Because the act of dreaming is in itself sacred, even if the dreams don't come true the way you imagined. Wasted playing the same 3 chords on a guitar for hours, not to become a rock star, but just because the vibration of the strings feels like therapy for a soul no one knows is tired. Wasted taking the long road home, stopping for coffee at a place that makes you nostalgic for no reason, because nostalgia isn't about returning to something specific, it's about the longing to feel something again. Something that once made you believe the world was good. Wasted on conversations with strangers that lead nowhere. Because not every interaction has to be network building or goal-oriented. Some are just little sparks in the dark reminding you that we're all stumbling through this life together, searching for light in each other's eyes. Wasted on sunrises you don't photograph and sunsets you don't post, on songs you play just for yourself, on smiles you give with no expectation of being noticed. Wasted by being fully, unapologetically human with all the messiness, slowness, contradictions, and chaos that come with it. Because maybe the biggest lie we're sold is that time should always be optimized, monetized, tracked, and measured, when really, the most profound moments are often the ones that defy any metric. The ones that slip through our fingers precisely because we weren't trying to hold onto them. If you could turn back time, don't try to fix everything, don't rush to be better. Don't relive it with the sterile caution of hindsight, live it again with reckless softness, live it knowing that it will end. And that knowledge is not a burden but a gift. Wasted singing badly at the top of your lungs, wasting hours on stupid YouTube videos that make you laugh till your stomach hurts, wasted on ice cream at midnight and meaningless detours on road trips, wasted on love letters you'll never send and playlists you'll never share. Because time spent on joy, on expression, on connection, even if fleeting or imperfect, is never truly wasted. If anything, the real waste is in trying so hard to be productive that you forget what it feels like to be alive. Go back and waste time lying on your bed staring at the ceiling, imagining alternate lives you'll never live. Not because they're better, but because the act of imagining makes you fall in love with the endless possibility of who you are. Wasted by taking your younger self's hand and telling them it's okay to not have it all figured out, that they're allowed to fall apart and laugh through the tears, to chase moments instead of milestones, to feel lost without needing a map. Wasted in the arms of someone you miss, even if only in a dream, whispering all the words you never said, not to change the past, but to heal the part of you that still carries its echo. Wasted creating art no one will see, dancing in your room in the glow of fairy lights. Wasted staring at old photographs and remembering the way you used to look at the world, with wonder, with fear, with a fragile kind of hope that time hasn't quite extinguished. Because if time is a river, always rushing forward, then turning it back is a miracle. And miracles should be used not to perfect the past, but to honor it, not to erase mistakes, but to find the poetry in them, not to relive glory, but to find grace in the ordinary. If you could turn back time, wasted slowly, wasted deliberately, wasted with all the heart you didn't know you had back then. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do in a world obsessed with progress is to be still, to be present, to be grateful for time wasted in the name of love, laughter, healing, and humanity. Wasted staring at the rain slipping down a window pane like time itself, each drop a second you don't need to hold on to, just feel. Wasted going back to the moments you thought were insignificant, like standing barefoot on cool tiles in summer, eating mangoes on the balcony, or watching your parents laugh when they thought no one was looking. Because those were never small moments, they were entire universes of meaning disguised as ordinary. Wasted with people who make you feel seen, even if you drifted away from them later, because that feeling, however fleeting, mattered in ways you didn't realize then. Wasted falling in love too fast, saying too much, trusting too easily. Because even the heartbreaks carved space for deeper versions of yourself to emerge later. Even the silence taught you the language of stillness. Wasted rereading texts from people who are no longer around, not to bring them back, but to remember what connection once felt like, how simple words could light you up inside like fireflies in a jar. Wasted on walks through forests you forgot to appreciate, on quiet lakes that mirrored the sky, on the kind of afternoons that ended with golden light spilling through trees and the comforting ache of nothing needing to be done. Wasted by laughing too loud in restaurants, by dancing badly at weddings, by letting your guard down just because you were tired of pretending to be okay all the time. Wasted holding someone's hand even if it didn't last, because there's something sacred in shared warmth, even if it was temporary. Wasted sleeping in, missing appointments, skipping classes once in a while, just to lie on your bed, listening to songs that made you feel like maybe you weren't alone in the world after all. Wasted smiling at the memory of your younger self and all the silly, beautiful things they believed in, like true love, endless summers, and the magic of wishing at 11:11. Wasted by not rushing back to fix mistakes, but instead sitting beside them, holding their hand like you would a hurt child, saying, "It's okay. You didn't know any better. You were learning." Wasted giving your past self the kindness you never received from others, the forgiveness you once begged for in silence, the gentleness that turns pain into poetry. Wasted taking the long way, always, the route with more stories, more laughter, more detours and dead ends, and roadside chai stalls, where you met strangers who told you the meaning of life in between sips. Wasted lighting candles without a reason, cooking meals you ate alone, but still plated beautifully because you finally realized you're worth showing up for, even when no one else does. Wasted calling your parents just to hear their voices, not out of duty, but out of love. Because one day, those voices will become echoes and the calls will end, not because of anger or distance, but because time takes without asking. Wasted buying gifts you can't afford, not out of extravagance, but out of joy. Because giving, when it's pure, is its own kind of wealth. Wasted sitting in silence beside someone you love. No words exchanged, just the safety of presence. And understand that peace doesn't always need conversation. Sometimes it lives in shared breath. Wasted scrolling through memories you swore you'd let go of, not to regret them, but to remember that you survived them. And in that survival, you became someone deeper, softer, more alive. Wasted hugging people a little longer, not worrying about how it looks, but how it feels. Because time cannot measure the power of touch. Only hearts can. Wasted. Singing lullabies to your inner child, the one who still cries in secret, still wonders if they're enough, still hopes for a home that feels safe. Wasted giving yourself permission to cry in front of people, to let the tears fall like confessions. Because vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the bravest form of truth. Wasted being wrong without punishing yourself, being lost without apologizing, being tired without explaining why, because life is hard, and you don't owe strength to anyone, not even yourself. Wasted doing nothing, absolutely nothing, on days when the world feels too loud, and your soul asks for quiet. And the only thing that makes sense is sitting in a room with your thoughts, letting them rise and fall like tides. Wasted by being imperfect, by being human, by being real in a world that keeps telling you to be a brand, a product, a constant performer. Wasted letting go of people who left without closure, not because it didn't matter, but because you matter more. And carrying pain forever is not proof of love, but a wound that deserves healing. Wasted dancing in your kitchen with the lights off and your favorite song playing, pretending the floor is a stage and no one is watching, because joy is not performance, it's presence. Wasted scribbling thoughts in a journal no one will read, drawing messy sketches that only you understand, writing letters to people you miss but will never send, because some emotions are not meant for display, they're sacred. Whispers between you and the universe. Wasted on late-night walks where you feel like the only person awake in the world, yet strangely connected to everything. The trees, the stars, the air that wraps around you like a friend. Wasted learning to love your own company, to enjoy your own silence, to hold your own hand when the world turns cold. Wasted chasing sunsets, catching raindrops, naming stars, laughing for no reason, staying up late to watch the moon rise, whispering dreams to the dark just to hear your voice say them out loud. Wasted doing things you were once too scared to try, painting, baking, swimming, playing the flute, calling someone first, saying I love you before they do. Because fear should not be the author of your life story. Wasted forgiving people who never apologized, not for them, but for your freedom, your peace, your sanity. Wasted reading poetry that doesn't rhyme, stories that don't end well, movies that make you cry, songs that break you open. Because art is a mirror, and in breaking, we often discover our most honest reflections. Wasted showing up for people who never asked you to, because love is not about being needed, it's about choosing to care even when it's inconvenient. Wasted returning to the places that once hurt you, not to relive the pain, but to reclaim your power, to walk those paths not as a victim, but as someone who rose. Wasted speaking up when your voice shakes, standing your ground even when it's lonely. Choosing kindness when you're tired, choosing rest when you're overwhelmed, choosing yourself when no one else does. Wasted watching the sea for hours, because the tide never asks for attention, it just exists, relentlessly, beautifully, like you. Wasted praying, not in words, but in presence, in stillness, in the quiet surrender of trusting that something greater holds you, even when you don't believe in anything at all. Wasted grieving fully when you need to, scream, sob, crumble if you must, because pretending you're okay never healed anyone, but honesty might. Wasted planting seeds you'll never see grow, writing words that won't be read in your lifetime, doing good with no audience. Because legacy isn't always loud, it's in the ripple effect of grace. Wasted telling people what they mean to you, sending voice notes just to say thank you, holding eye contact longer, laughing until your ribs hurt, living so intensely in the now that the future forgets to scare you. Wasted picking wildflowers, adopting stray dogs, helping strangers carry bags, holding doors open, leaving kind notes for no reason, because compassion is never waste, even when it feels unnoticed. Wasted rediscovering wonder, walking barefoot on wet grass, marveling at dragonflies, letting your shadow dance with the sun, smiling at yourself in the mirror like you're meeting someone worthy for the first time. Wasted staying up till dawn talking about life, loss, and love with people who get you, who see you beyond the filters, beyond the fear, beyond the version you show the world. Wasted forgiving yourself for not being who you thought you'd be by now, for breaking promises to yourself, for trying and failing, for surviving in ways that don't look impressive but took everything you had. Wasted remembering that productivity is not the currency of worth, that existence in itself is a miracle, that you do not need to earn rest, joy, or love. Wasted lying in the arms of someone who listens to your silence and understands it, who touches your hair like it's something sacred, who chooses you in the stillness, not just in the spotlight. Wasted learning how to breathe again, how to live again, how to love yourself through every version, even the ones you once tried to hide. Wasted by whispering your dreams into the wind, even if no one else hears them, even if they seem too small or too impossible. Because the very act of saying them out loud is a kind of magic, a declaration to yourself that your hopes matter, even in a world that tries to flatten them. Wasted going back to moments that felt like endings and seeing how they were really beginnings in disguise, how the pain you thought would break you was actually planting seeds of transformation deep beneath the surface. Wasted rewatching childhood cartoons, not to escape reality, but to remember the innocence you once had, the way you used to believe in talking animals and happy endings, and maybe still do in the quiet corners of your heart. Wasted by letting someone hold your hand in public, even if it makes you nervous. Because vulnerability is not just about wounds, it's also about allowing love to be visible, about saying this is who I am, and I'm not hiding anymore. Wasted sitting on the edge of the bed at 3 a.m., talking to yourself in the dark, admitting the truths you've buried under to-do lists and distractions. Because self-honesty is a conversation that can't be rushed. Wasted by being overly sentimental, crying at commercials, keeping ticket stubs from movies that meant something to you once, rereading birthday cards, smelling old clothes just to feel close to people you miss. Because these fragments of emotion are not clutter, they are pieces of you. Wasted planting trees you'll never sit under, teaching kids lessons they may not appreciate until decades later, showing up with quiet strength for causes that won't trend but still matter deeply. Wasted staring into the eyes of someone you once hurt and saying, without pride, I'm sorry. Because time doesn't owe you second chances, but courage does. Wasted reintroducing yourself to your inner artist, letting your hands get messy with paint or clay or ink or flour, not to impress, but to feel, to return to. The primal joy of creating for no reason, but the way it fills you with light. Wasted laying under the stars on a rooftop you once danced on, letting the night sky remind you how tiny and vast you are all at once, how your worries shrink under the endless canvas above. Wasted learning things that won't help your career, philosophy, mythology, the names of birds, the constellations, because knowledge for its own sake feeds the spirit in ways no resume ever can. Wasted being the kind of person who cries at weddings and laughs at funerals, not because you're confused, but because emotions are never as binary as we pretend. They're tangled and messy and real, like us. Wasted singing karaoke badly, playing board games competitively, wearing costumes to parties just because it's fun, because adulthood should never mean the death of play. Wasted holding space for people without needing to fix them, listening with your full body, letting them unravel without fear of being judged or corrected, just seen. Wasted telling someone you love them when the timing isn't perfect, when the setting isn't romantic, when it's just an ordinary Tuesday morning. Because love isn't about spectacle, it's about truth, spoken when it's hardest. Wasted dancing in traffic, laughing in libraries, hugging your friends like you might never see them again. Because time is slippery and presence is protest. Wasted forgiving your past self for not knowing better, for trusting the wrong people, for hurting the right ones, for surviving however they could, because they got you here, to this breath, to this sentence, to this moment. And that matters more than perfection. Wasted choosing peace over pride, choosing to walk away from battles that don't need to be fought, choosing softness in a world that rewards sharpness. Wasted laying your head on someone's lap and letting them stroke your hair like you're a child again, not to regress, but to remember the safety of unconditional affection. Wasted saying, I miss you when you do, I'm scared when you are, I need help when you can't carry it alone. Because strength is not in the hiding, it's in the opening, the revealing, the cracking open of the soul. Wasted keeping old songs in your playlist, even if your taste has changed. Because certain melodies carry memories in their chords, and when they play, the past whispers back. Wasted collecting seashells, chasing butterflies, catching snowflakes on your tongue. Useless things that teach you everything about being alive. Wasted dreaming of futures you might never live, places you might never visit, people you might never meet. Because dreaming keeps your spirit elastic, ready to stretch beyond limits. Wasted by starting over at 30, at 40, at 70. Not because you failed, but because you grew. And growth often means returning to the beginning with new eyes. Wasted naming your fears, writing them down, folding them into paper boats and setting them afloat in a river, watching them drift away, not to forget them, but to honor the fact that you faced them. Wasted calling your siblings just to talk about nonsense, revisiting childhood rivalries with laughter instead of resentment, choosing love over history. Wasted lying on your back in the middle of an empty field, arms wide open, daring the universe to surprise you, to show you something you didn't expect. Wasted saying no when your body screams for rest, yes when your heart leaps. With curiosity, maybe, when you need time to decide, not everything needs to be certain or efficient. Wasted telling strangers their smile made your day, writing anonymous letters of encouragement, being the reason someone remembers today as a little less heavy. Wasted walking barefoot on the beach, letting the waves kiss your ankles like they know your name, like they're saying you're still here, and that's enough. Wasted learning to cook your favorite meal from scratch, even if it takes all day, even if it's just for one, because nourishing yourself is holy work. Wasted asking your elders about their stories, their first loves, their biggest regrets, their quiet victories, because their voices won't echo forever, and wisdom doesn't always come with a headline. Wasted listening to old voice notes from someone you once loved, not to grieve again, but to remember how deeply you felt, how alive your heart once was. Wasted holding your dog like a child, whispering secrets into their ears, letting their unconditional love remind you that you are always worth coming home to. Wasted on art museums, where you stare at one painting for an hour, getting lost in the brush strokes, imagining the hands that made them, the soul behind the color. Wasted letting go of timelines, of societal deadlines, of expectations that crush your joy. Choosing instead to move at the pace of your healing, your passion, your heart. Wasted tracing the outline of your lovers' face while they sleep, memorizing the way their eyelids flutter, the rise and fall of their breath, the miracle of someone choosing to stay. Wasted learning to be your own best friend, your own biggest fan, your own source of comfort on the nights when no one else shows up. Wasted wandering aimlessly in bookstores, losing track of time in second-hand shops, getting lost in stories older than you. Wasted laughing so hard you snort, crying so hard you feel empty and clean afterward, feeling everything with reckless honesty. Wasted revisiting old journal entries and seeing how far you've come, how many storms you've survived, how many scars you now wear as proof of endurance. Wasted decorating your room with fairy lights and memories, not for aesthetics, but for the joy of curating a space that reflects your insides. Wasted saying thank you to the cashier, to the cleaner, to the stranger who held the door. Gratitude is never wasted, even when it's quiet. Wasted holding someone's gaze across a crowded room and smiling like you've just remembered who you are. Wasted doing one kind thing every day without telling anyone, just to remind yourself of the quiet power you carry. Wasted rereading your favorite novel from when you were 13, crying at the same parts, laughing at jokes you didn't understand back then, because you're allowed to return to softness. Wasted taking a different route home just to see something new, because even the most familiar places, wonder can be found if you're looking. Wasted remembering the way your mother hummed when she cooked, the smell of your grandfather's aftershave, the rhythm of your childhood home's creaking stairs, because memory is the softest kind of time travel. And sometimes wasting time means reclaiming it from forgetting. Wasted turning your phone off for a day. Sitting with the discomfort of silence until it becomes a friend. Wasted teaching someone what you know without charging them. Without expecting anything in return, because knowledge is a gift meant to be shared, not hoarded. Wasted learning a new language, even if you never speak it fluently, just to expand your tongue, your brain, your world. Wasted praying not for answers, but for connection, not for miracles, but for meaning, not for clarity, but for comfort. Wasted standing in the rain without an umbrella, letting yourself be soaked in something pure and unedited, because you're tired of being dry and controlled. All the time. Wasted being wrong, changing your mind, evolving publicly, showing that growth is not shameful, it's stunning. Wasted sending love to people who left, not because they deserve it, but because you do. You deserve to feel light, to release, to let go without bitterness. Wasted writing your own name over and over again in different styles, like you're trying to remember who you are beyond the labels, beyond what the world calls you, beyond what even you've settled for being. Waste. It chasing dragonflies in the backyard, like you used to when you believed that anything that flew had magic in it, like you believed you could catch wonder with your bare hands. Wasted going back to that one evening on the terrace when the wind whispered secrets only you heard and you felt, for the first time in a long time, that the universe knew your name. Wasted not fixing your hair before stepping out, not sucking in your stomach for pictures, not apologizing for taking up space in the frame or in the room, because you have spent too many years shrinking and calling it grace. Wasted having conversations with yourself in the mirror, not to practice anything, but to look into your own eyes and speak like you are someone worth addressing with love, like your own reflection deserves the full version of you, unfiltered and undimmed. Wasted remembering the smell of your old school books, the sound of your friends' laugh during roll call, the way the chalk broke in the teacher's hand and made everyone laugh. Because sometimes you don't realize those moments are home until you no longer live there. Wasted asking your father how he fell in love with your mother, how he dealt with grief when he lost his father, how he felt when he first held you. Wasted gathering stories from those who seem invincible, so that one day when they aren't, you're not left only with silence. Wasted playing with the softness of your pet's ears while they nap, whispering promises to protect them forever, even though you know forever is shorter for them, even though you know one day they will leave a hole you can't patch, and you'll still say it anyway. Wasted saying, "I forgive you," to someone who hurt you not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve to stop carrying them inside your chest like a wound that never closes. Wasted sleeping under the stars, surrounded by the sounds of crickets and wind and the hum of the earth breathing. Wasted feeling small in the best way possible, like maybe you're part of something too big to understand but beautiful enough to trust. Wasted hugging someone for just a second longer than usual, letting them feel your heartbeat slow against theirs, because in a world that rushes everything, stillness is a kind of love. Wasted doodling in the margins of important papers, drawing hearts and arrows and silly suns with sunglasses, because play is protest against a world that wants you serious and productive every moment. Wasted putting your phone down at dinner and really asking, "How are you, really?" and waiting patiently, bravely, for an honest answer. Wasted lying on your childhood bed and feeling how much smaller it feels now, how time turns giants into ghosts, and how the mattress still somehow remembers the shape of your dreams. Wasted by returning to your first heartbreak, not to relive it, but to thank it for teaching you that love doesn't need to last forever to be real, that being left doesn't mean being unworthy, that you're still here and still loving. Wasted looking through old birthday albums, touching the faces of friends you no longer speak to and smiling anyway, because they were once your whole world, and that deserves gratitude, not regret. Wasted pulling over on the side of the road just to watch the sky bleed orange during sunset, not because you have nowhere to be, but because your soul asked you to be there, just for this, just for now. Wasted visiting your old school, walking down halls that echo with the laughter of a version of you who didn't know what was coming, who didn't need to, who existed fully in the now and would be proud of how far you've come. Wasted writing long, meandering letters to friends that have become strangers, not because you expect them to reply, but because there's peace in saying what you never did, in closing the door with gentleness. Wasted forgiving the year you did nothing, the month you couldn't get out of bed, the week you disappointed everyone, the day you let yourself fall apart, because you are still worthy on your worst days, still deserving of kindness when you're drowning. Wasted twirling the middle of the street when no cars are coming, pretending you are in a movie where the soundtrack swells and the world pauses for your joy. Wasted listening to your grandparents speak in the dialect they were born with, learning the words they've hidden in their throats all these years, and repeating them aloud like spells so they never die with silence. Wasted lying on your back in a garden, watching ants move across the earth like tiny workers of fate, remembering that there's choreography in everything if you slow down enough to see it. Wasted staring at your hands, tracing the lines of your palm and wondering if your fate was really written there or if you get to choose your story after all. Wasted crying without trying to stop yourself, sobbing like you trust your body to release what your mouth never could, like you're brave enough to let pain move through you without shame. Wasted sitting by a lake in silence with someone who understands that not every moment needs to be filled with words, that some connections speak best through presence alone. Wasted learning to make your favorite dish from scratch, burning the first 3 times and laughing instead of cursing, because feeding yourself is a declaration that you are worth effort. Wasted sitting in a room with your younger siblings and letting them take the lead, seeing the world through their eyes, letting them remind you of the wonder you've buried beneath deadlines. Wasted spending us curating a playlist for someone you care about, knowing they may never listen to it, but also knowing that each song is a breadcrumb, trail of how you feel. What a tender way to say I see you, I hear you, I feel this with you. Wasted playing hopscotch or skipping stones or building sandcastles, because the child you once were is still watching, still waiting for you to remember how it felt to be free. Wasted painting your toenails a color you used to love in college, not because anyone will see them, but because that shade makes you feel like the bold, hopeful, heart-on-sleeve version of yourself you almost forgot. Waste it writing I love you in the fog on your mirror just to see it fade, just to remind yourself that everything is temporary, and that's what makes it precious. Wasted letting people take pictures of you, even if you hate how you look, even if you feel awkward, because one day you'll be grateful for the proof that you existed, that you were loved, that you were there. Wasted watching fireworks alone, holding your own hand, smiling at strangers, letting joy find you even when no one else shows up. Wasted asking someone how they survived their worst day, not because you need advice, but because we all need stories that remind us we're not the only ones who have broken and rebuilt ourselves. Wasted sitting on your balcony, watching the rain fall on leaves, feeling that ache in your chest that isn't sadness, but something more sacred. Perhaps awe, perhaps memory, perhaps a kind of quiet love that has no name. Wasted returning to an old poem you never finished and adding just one line, not to complete it, but to touch it again with who you've become. Wasted letting your friends see your ugly cry, letting them see you scared, tired, jealous, broken, not because you want pity, but because real love is built in the moments when the mask comes off. Wasted learning how to dance in your kitchen again, barefoot, reckless, offbeat, arms in the air like the music was written just for your healing. Wasted creating a playlist for your future self, filled with songs you want them to remember when they feel lost. Because sometimes the only thing that saves us is the voice of who we used to be saying, you're going to make it. Wasted writing a thank you note to someone who helped you 10 years ago and never knew what it meant to you. Sending it now even if they forgot. Because kindness echoes even across time. Wasted asking the universe questions you know won't be answered, like do souls really meet again? Or did that moment mean anything? Or was it all worth it? Not because you expect clarity, but because asking is an act of connection, a thread between your heart and something much older, much vaster, much softer than logic. Wasted sitting with your fears, naming them out loud like you're introducing them to a friend. This is the fear of being forgotten. This is the fear of not being enough. This is the fear of loving more than I'm loved. And somehow, in the naming, They lose their fangs and become manageable shadows instead of monsters. Wasted watching a sunrise from start to finish without checking your phone, without taking a picture. Just sitting there as the sky catches fire and your breath slows to match the rhythm of light crawling into the world like it's crawling into you. Wasted sending a message to someone you lost touch with, even if it's been years, even if the silence between you feels ancient. Because sometimes one message can unlock 1,000 memories, and maybe even a second chance. Wasted giving someone a compliment they'll remember for years, not about how they look, but about who they are, how they carry light even on heavy days, how their laughter feels like home, how their silence never feels empty. Wasted lighting incense or candles, just because the room deserves to feel sacred, even if no one else is coming over, even if it's only you. Especially if it's only you. Wasted by learning your mother's favorite songs, dancing with her in the kitchen, letting the years melt away between flour-dusted counters and shared lyrics you both keep forgetting. Wasted offering your seat, your umbrella, your attention to someone else. Not because it's expected, but because kindness without agenda is a kind of spiritual art. Wasted looking at old versions of yourself, pictures, diary entries, emails, and instead of cringing, saying thank you, because without them, there would be no now, no new skin, wrapped around the same beating heart. Wasted taking your time, through your healing, through your growth, through your figuring it out. Because anyone who asks you to rush your becoming does not understand what it means to bloom slowly. Wasted starting again and again and again, not because you're indecisive, but because you're evolving, and change is not linear. It's circular, spiraling inward until you reach the core of who you really are. Wasted by planting flowers in broken teacups, giving names to your houseplants, talking to the moon like she's your sister. Because whimsy is not childish, it's sacred. It's the soul reminding you to find joy in the weird and the wonderful. Wasted laughing until your stomach hurts at jokes you've heard 1,000 times. Because repetition in humor is its own kind of homecoming. Wasted creating traditions just for yourself, like pancakes on Sundays, solo movie nights on Thursdays, a walk with no destination every first day of the month. Because rituals aren't only for religion, they're for remembering who you are outside the noise. Wasted listening to your body when it aches, when it sighs, when it tells you to stop, to move, to breathe, to rest. Because your body has been your most loyal home, even when you treated it like a stranger. Wasted refusing to chase people who walk away, not out of pride, but because you're learning to stay close to those who walk toward you with open palms, not closed doors. Wasted building something from scratch, not just a recipe or a shelf, but a life you actually like waking up in, a life that feels like yours even if no one claps for it. Wasted talking to your reflection like you're your own best friend, saying, I'm proud of you, even if it feels silly at first. Because the words we say to ourselves plant seeds, and one day, you'll bloom from them. Wasted finding magic in the mundane, how tea steams against a cold window, how socks fresh from the dryer hug your feet, how the scent of a familiar shampoo can make you feel 5 years old again. Wasted choosing silence over noise, mystery over answers, presence over plans. Because sometimes the most honest parts of life don't make a sound, they arrive like dusk, slowly and softly and completely. Wasted asking your dad what his dreams were before he had you, what he feared most as a young man, what moments shaped him in silence. Because behind every parent is a person trying to be more than what the world expects. Wasted collecting words that move you, scribbled in the margins of library books, whispered in old movies, spoken by strangers, because language is how we leave breadcrumbs for our future selves. Wasted revisiting places that broke your heart, not to reopen wounds, but to see how you no longer bleed when you walk there, to feel the healing in your bones that quietly rewrote your history. Wasted starting hobbies with no intention of mastering them, photography, knitting, coding, whistling, roller skating, because you deserve to be a beginner at something just for the joy of trying. Wasted inviting someone over even when your house is messy and your life is messier, trusting that connection doesn't require perfection, just honesty, and maybe tea. Wasted reading the same bedtime story to your child, or your inner child over and over again, watching their eyes light up at the same parts, because comfort is often found in what we already know by heart. Wasted breathing deeply in the middle of an argument, pausing, asking yourself what you truly want to be right about, because peace is rarely loud and ego rarely wise. Wasted letting go of timelines of where you should be, what you should have done, who you should have become. Because life is not a checklist, it's a canvas. And you are not behind, you are becoming. Wasted turning off the alarm and sleeping an hour more, because your body isn't lazy, it's sacred. And sometimes restoration is more important than reputation. Wasted singing badly on purpose, just to hear yourself break into laughter at how off-key you are, reminding yourself that life doesn't always need to be beautiful to be full of joy. Wasted learning to say, I don't know, without shame, because not knowing is not failure, it's curiosity in motion. Wasted rereading a message someone sent years ago that made you feel seen, and letting it warm your chest again like it's the first time, because kindness, when genuine, is timeless. Wasted writing your will while you're young, not out of morbidity, but out of gratitude, an acknowledgement of your life story and the people you want to bless when your chapter ends. Wasted holding your baby knees and whispering dreams into her ear, because one day, she'll grow into a woman who needs to know someone believed in her from the beginning. Wasted praying for strangers who look like they're carrying invisible weight, sending silent wishes into the air, like invisible hugs that land when no one's looking. Wasted telling people you love them while you can, while they're still within reach, while their phone is still active and their voice still answers, because one day, all you'll have is voicemail. Wasted buying yourself flowers, not because you're lonely, but because you're finally treating yourself like someone worth celebrating. Wasted not knowing what you want to do with your life, and admitting that out loud, trusting that clarity grows best in open hands. Wasted giving your time to someone who needed a listener more than a solution, and realizing later that your silence helped them find their voice. Wasted by laughing too hard at your own jokes, by singing into your hairbrush like a pop star, by crying during animated movies, by letting yourself feel everything in full volume. Wasted by being fully, painfully, beautifully alive in a world that keeps asking you to numb, to perform, to pretend, and instead, just exist in all your glorious mess, like a poem that rhymes only with truth. Wasted telling your younger self you made it, over and over again until you believe it, until the echo of those words reaches the version of you who sat alone in the dark thinking they never would, until the child inside you unclenches their fists and breathes. Wasted doing the thing that scared you the most, not to prove anything to anyone else but to yourself, because every time you face fear and keep walking, you remind yourself that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's walking anyway, shaking, sweating, but steady. Wasted by remembering not everything has to be productive to be meaningful, love isn't efficient, healing isn't linear, and the best stories don't always come with bullet points or outcomes, they're messy, chaotic, and full of detours that end up being the reason we even cared in the first place. Wasted by choosing presence over pressure, soul over schedule, wonder over work. Wasted visiting the park you used to go to as a child and sitting on the swings with no one around, pushing yourself gently back and forth, and letting the motion remind you that not all joy needs company. Wasted whispering a prayer into the sky for someone you've lost, watching the clouds shift as though they heard you, as though something beyond logic is nodding back. Wasted calling your teacher from high school just to say thank you, just to let them know that something they said in passing shaped your whole path, even if they don't remember, because sometimes the people who change us the most have no idea they ever did. Wasted keeping your grandfather's old wristwatch, even if it no longer works, because time is not always measured in ticks and talks, it's sometimes measured in how something makes your heart ache. With memory. Wasted walking into a bookstore and buying a novel, just because the cover looked like something your heart would choose if it had eyes. Wasted watching strangers in a cafe laugh, imagining their lives, building stories in your head not to escape yours, but to expand it, because fiction is just truth with a different face. Wasted saying no to opportunities that don't align with your soul, even if they look good on paper, even if people raise their eyebrows at your refusal. Because a peaceful heart is better than a padded resume. Wasted relearning how to breathe, not the automatic kind, but the intentional kind. The kind where you close your eyes and fill your lungs and feel everything expand, as if your body is reminding you are still here. Wasted talking to the plants in your room, thanking them for cleaning your air and brightening your mornings, for silently growing even when the sun forgets to show up. Wasted writing your future self a letter, sealing it, hiding it in a book you love, knowing that one day, years from now, you'll stumble upon it and remember who you were when you wrote it. Someone hopeful, someone healing, someone trying. Wasted crying in the middle of a song because a single lyric unlocked something in you that had been buried under days, months, maybe years of pretending to be fine. Wasted building a playlist of songs that make you feel alive, that make you want to run barefoot down a hill, that make you cry and dance and smile through tears, and listen to it in the car with the windows down, singing like your voice is a gift, not a burden. Wasted giving your love generously, wildly, with abandon, not foolishly, but fearlessly. Because love is not a currency to be hoarded, it's a river to be flowed through. Wasted trusting someone again even after being hurt, not because they deserve it, but because your heart does. It deserves to know softness again, warmth again, connection again. Wasted saying I don't know in conversations where you feel the pressure to sound smart, because honesty is far more magnetic than performance ever will be. Wasted writing poetry that no one will ever read, letting the words spill like secrets you never knew you needed to release, and keeping them just for you, a garden of private truths. Wasted by taking a day off just because, not because you're sick, not because you're exhausted, but because you want to watch the sky change and your tea grow cold while you sit there doing nothing at all. Wasted going through old voice messages just to hear the way someone said your name when they loved you, not to reopen the wound, but to remember what being adored sounds like. Wasted sitting on the bathroom floor with the door locked and the lights off, not because you're broken, but because sometimes the only place quiet enough to listen to your soul is the space between tiles and moonlight. Wasted choosing your mental health over your milestones, your joy over your job title, your peace over your productivity. Because the point is not to get everything done, it's to feel everything fully. Wasted celebrating your tiny victories, like waking up without hitting snooze, or saying no to something you didn't want to do, or choosing salad when your heart wanted to spiral. Because the small wins build the life we eventually love. Wasted telling your friends you love them in full, undiluted words, not love ya or miss ya, but I love you. And I'm grateful you exist. Because friendships deserve poetry too. Wasted taking photos of moments that feel like home. Not because they're Instagram-worthy, but because they're heart-worthy, like your mother laughing with her eyes closed, or your friend stirring chai while humming, or your reflection smiling when no one is watching. Wasted remembering birthdays, anniversaries, and the day your friend's dog passed, and texting them just to say, I remember, I still care. Because grief never leaves, it just changes shape. Wasted riding a bicycle through an empty road and singing to yourself, pretending you're the only person alive, not because you're lonely, but because solitude can be sacred. Wasted going through your childhood toys and letting each one hold your hand as it pulls you back into a world that felt simpler, lighter, full of pretend that made you feel powerful. Wasted by being present for someone else's healing even when you don't understand it. Holding space, keeping quiet, and simply staying there as they fall apart and stitch themselves back together. Wasted not chasing closure from people who left without giving it. Choosing instead to write your own ending, your own piece, your own way forward. Wasted spending a whole day with your grandparents doing nothing in particular, just sitting with them, letting time blur into stories, snacks, and quiet nods, because presence is often the best gift. Wasted skipping plans and watching the rain from your balcony, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder like you used to as a kid when storms made you feel small but safe. Wasted listening to the same love song on repeat while staring at the ceiling, letting it carry you through waves of nostalgia, sweetness, and longing, even if you don't fully know who or what you're missing, waste it. Telling yourself you are enough without needing to earn it, without needing someone else to say it, simply because your existence is not a debt, it is a miracle. Waste it on late-night phone calls that last until 3 a.m., when conversations become confessions and your voice feels like home in someone else's ear. Waste it talking to the moon, making wishes on stars, letting your logical brain step aside for once while your heart tries to believe in something bigger, softer, more mysterious than reason. Waste it watching documentaries about whales, birds, or space just to remember how vast the world is and how beautiful it feels to not be the center of it all. Waste it smiling at strangers, waving at babies, giving compliments to people you'll never see again. Because spreading light doesn't always need a plan. Waste it by not rushing to heal, by not pretending to have moved on before you really have, by giving your grief room to breathe and your heart permission to ache as long as it needs to. Waste it taking photos of your hands, your eyes, your scars, and calling them beautiful, naming each imperfection as proof that you've lived and survived and carried love. Waste it reading bedtime stories to yourself in a soft voice, tucking yourself in with a kind whisper, "You've done enough today. It's okay to rest." Waste it forgiving the people who didn't know better, even if you still wish they had. Because bitterness is heavy and your shoulders were made for dancing, not carrying anger forever. Waste it learning the constellations not to impress anyone, but because there's something comforting in knowing people across time have looked up and seen the same stars, named them in different languages, prayed beneath them, wished upon them, and felt small in the same beautiful way. Waste it sitting in a quiet church or temple or mosque or empty room, not to seek religion, but to meet silence, to hear how loud your own heart sounds when nothing else interrupts, to feel that something holy doesn't always need a name. Waste it walking slowly, deliberately, with nowhere to go, letting your feet remember what it feels like to move without urgency, to carry you simply because they can, to take you somewhere unexpected. Waste it lighting candles for no reason, filling the room with softness, with warmth, with a kind of glow that turns ordinary walls into sacred spaces. Waste it reading a poem 10 times until it finally lands inside you, until a single line opens something you didn't know was closed, until the rhythm of someone else's pain makes you feel less alone in yours. Waste it laughing at your own jokes, dancing in the elevator, humming in public, doing things people say are embarrassing because joy has no shame, only freedom. Waste it writing apologies you'll never send, letting the ink carry what your voice never could, not to get closure, but to give it to yourself, to them, to the moment that shaped you. Waste it by saying I was wrong when you were, not because you owe it, but because growth is more important than pride, because admitting fault is not weakness but wisdom with its sleeves rolled up. Waste it watching the light change across your bedroom walls, from sunrise to noon to golden hour, paying attention to how even your own space evolves, quietly, daily, without fanfare. Waste it giving someone your full attention, no phone, no distractions, just eye contact and presence. Because being fully seen is rare, an offering that is the most generous form of love. Waste it looking at old scars and remembering not the pain, but the healing, not the fall, but how you stood again, shakily at first, then stronger than you thought you could be. Waste it letting go of old grudges you've been holding like treasures, realizing they've only weighed you down. And peace is always a better inheritance than resentment. Waste it smiling at your reflection, as if seeing an old friend for the first time in years, not because anything has changed, but because you're finally willing to see yourself with kinder eyes. Waste it walking into a museum and standing in front of one painting for an hour, letting the colors speak their language into you, letting your imagination stretch across time and canvas. Waste it going through your phone and deleting things that no longer serve you, screenshots of old conversations, numbers you'll never call, photos that only reopen wounds, because digital clutter is still clutter and space is sacred. Waste it starting a journal where you don't make sense, where you ramble, where you confess, where your handwriting gets messy and your spelling slips, because truth isn't always tidy, and neither are feelings. Wasted calling your mom just to ask her about her favorite song when she was 20, or how she dealt with heartbreak, or what dreams she never chased. Because sometimes the strongest people have the softest untold stories. Wasted making pancakes at midnight, dancing in your kitchen to 90s music, talking to your plants like their roommates, doing whatever makes the silence feel less empty and more yours. Wasted turning old t-shirts into pillowcases, broken mugs into pen holders, memories into artwork. Not because they need fixing, but because they still carry meaning. And meaning is never wasteful. Wasted picking flowers from the sidewalk and giving them to strangers just to remind them that kindness often arrives unexpectedly with no price and no agenda. Wasted learning your grandparents' recipes, even if they take all day and never taste quite the same. Because cooking someone's food is one way to keep their love alive long after their hands are gone. Wasted lying on your back on the floor, eyes closed, music loud, and pretending for just a moment that the world outside doesn't exist, that all that matters is this song, this feeling, this breath. Wasted teaching a child something you wish someone had taught you. How to name their feelings, how to say no without guilt, how to believe they are enough, always. Wasted saying yes to adventures that scare you just a little, because that edge between fear and excitement is where life whispers its best secrets. Wasted writing a book no one may ever read, painting something no one may ever buy, singing notes no one may ever hear. Because creating is how we meet our truest selves in the mirror. Wasted forgiving your teenage self for every awkward thing they said, every person they trusted too easily, every emotion they felt too big. Because they were learning, and you are still here, living proof that they made it through. Wasted picking up the phone and calling someone who crossed your mind 3 times in a week, even if it's been years, even if you don't know why, because connection doesn't always follow logic, it follows feeling. Wasted waking up early just to see the city before it wakes, before the traffic and emails and headlines drown the stillness, watching how even concrete holds a kind of morning magic. Wasted buying yourself a birthday gift, wrapping it, writing a card from you to you, celebrating your own existence with a kind of joy you often reserve only for others. Wasted walking through old neighborhoods just to feel the nostalgia sit beside you on the sidewalk, whispering reminders of who you used to be and how far you've come. Wasted collecting quotes that make your chest ache with truth, taping them to mirrors, scribbling them in notebooks, tattooing them on your soul. Wasted saying, I miss you to people, to places, to versions of yourself without rushing to replace them, allowing longing to live without needing to fix it. Wasted learning how to breathe into the tight places, your shoulders, your gut, your grief, until they soften. Until your body feels like a home instead of a battlefield. Wasted rewatching a movie that made you believe in love, even if you no longer do, even if the belief has become bruised, because hope has a way of rising from ruins. Wasted choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier, softness when hardness feels safer, vulnerability when walls seem wiser. Because the world already has enough armor, what it needs is more open hearts. Wasted talking to someone you've known for years and asking them something you never have, what their biggest fear is, who their first love was, what their happiest memory looks like in color. Because we rarely know people as deeply as we think. Wasted naming your boundaries and sticking to them, not because it's trendy, but because you finally realized that peace is a personal responsibility. Wasted lying under a blanket with your best friend, watching the same old movie, laughing at the same jokes, feeling like this moment is proof that not everything good has to change. Wasted journaling your pain without editing it, letting your truth spill raw and wild onto paper, because pretending has never healed anything. Wasted by saying thank you to the version of yourself who kept going when no one noticed, who stayed kind when life wasn't, who kept believing in light even when all you saw was dark. Wasted praying not for answers, but for presence, not for outcomes, but for the courage to walk through whatever comes next with grace. Wasted noticing how someone always puts extra sugar in your tea, or always walks on the side closer to traffic, or always remembers your least favorite song, and realizing that love is in the smallest, quietest details. Wasted doing nothing on purpose, lying in bed, while the sun spills across your skin, watching the fan spin, listening to the slow tick of the clock, not chasing, not striving, just being, wasted letting people outgrow you and walking away without chasing, trusting that the space they leave will become soil for something truer, wasted giving someone the benefit of the doubt one more time, not because they deserve it, but because you want to live with a heart that always chooses belief over bitterness, wasted naming the things that still make you feel alive, rain on rooftops, the smell of old books, spontaneous hugs, deep eye contact, full moons, and collecting them like precious stones, wasted returning to that one song that reminds you of who you used to be, before the world asked you to be so much, before you forgot that existing was already enough. Wasted whispering, I forgive you, to mirrors, to memories, to moments that fractured you. Knowing forgiveness is not permission, but release, a gift you give to your own future. Wasted holding your own hand in public, sitting across from your reflection like it's an old friend, and saying, we've been through a lot, haven't we? Because the longest relationship you'll ever have is with yourself, and you deserve gentleness in that journey. Wasted lying on grass and watching clouds drift like thoughts, naming them as they pass. One looks like freedom, one looks like sorrow, one looks like your old dog coming home, and letting them go just the same. Wasted picking up seashells on beaches no one else walks, carrying them home like tiny reminders that even forgotten beauty is still beauty. Wasted reading your childhood favorite book again and crying at the parts you didn't understand back then. Now realizing the story always had more layers, you just had to grow into them. Wasted answering honestly when someone asks, how are you? Not out of obligation, but because connection begins with truth. Wasted choosing to believe in love again, even when the past taught you otherwise. Not because you're naive, but because you're brave enough to try again with a wiser heart. Wasted remembering the names of your old teachers, the sound of your school bell, the way your shoes echoed in empty corridors after class. Because those echoes shaped who you became. Wasted sitting in silence with someone grieving without trying to fix it, just letting them know they don't have to carry their sadness alone. Wasted building new rituals, sunset walks, gratitude lists, Sunday morning playlists, things that ground you, things that remind you that time isn't only passing, it's presenting. Wasted talking to old photographs, telling them what became of their hopes, what dreams made it, which ones didn't, and how proud you still are of who they tried to be. Wasted noticing how someone pours tea with two hands when they're nervous, how another hums when they're happy. These small things are love's fingerprints, often missed by eyes that are always rushing. Wasted standing in the shower longer than needed, not to clean, but to feel the water wash something deeper than skin, to baptize the day, to start again, to soften what hardened. Wasted calling your childhood friend just to ask if they remember the day the sky turned orange and you both swore it was magic, just to know the memory lives into hearts. Wasted letting go of people who left without explanation, because their silence doesn't define your worth, your presence does. Wasted telling someone you make the world better even if they don't believe it yet, especially if they don't believe it yet. Wasted saying thank you to your old heartbreaks, because without them, you wouldn't know how deeply you can feel or how tenderly you can love again. Wasted giving yourself credit, not for being perfect, but for waking up every day and trying again, even when no one saw, even when it was hard. Wasted not finishing the to-do list, not replying to every message, not proving yourself, because existing is not a performance, and rest is not a sin. Wasted staying up late with a book that ruins you in the best way, because words are sometimes the only thing that hold us when everything else falls apart. Wasted rereading the same old journal entries and seeing how far you've come, not just in goals, but in grace. Wasted crying when you need to, laughing when you don't expect to, feeling without editing, loving without scripting. Wasted doing something you love badly, offbeat dancing, out of tune singing, messy painting, because joy doesn't care about skill, it cares that you showed up. Wasted writing letters to people you've never met, to parts of yourself you've forgotten, to the future that's still being shaped by the gentle choices you make now. Wasted learning the names of trees in your neighborhood, the shape of birds' songs, the rhythm of morning light through your window, because the world is still whispering wonder if you choose to listen, wasted dreaming of a version of yourself that's not wealthier or more successful, just freer, lighter, more at peace, and then taking even the tiniest step toward them. Wasted being wrong, growing anyway, stumbling with grace, falling and rising and falling again. Not because you want applause, but because your becoming is worth every ungraceful moment. Wasted turning off all the noise and just breathing, just being, letting your soul stretch in the silence until it remembers it's not behind, it's exactly where it's meant to be. Wasted by wasting it. Gloriously, intentionally, rebelliously, in the direction of softness, not survival, in the direction of presence, not performance. Wasted so fully that time forgets its grip on you and starts to melt, like honey on warm skin, like sunlight on closed eyes, like a song with no chorus, just feeling after feeling after feeling. Wasted not by escaping time, but by being so immersed in it that every second becomes a cathedral, every moment a home, every breath a declaration. I am here, I am real, I am alive, and I chose this. And when the clock ticks toward your final hour, when memory begins to blur and hands begin to slow, may you smile. Not because you used every moment wisely, but because you wasted it wildly, beautifully, with love. And may that be enough. Not that you managed time, but that you met it, danced with it, listened to it, and let it carry you into a life not measured in milestones, but in moments, not counted but cherished. And may you rest knowing that if you could turn back time, you wouldn't do it differently. Not because you always got it right, but because you finally learned what time was for, not to use, but to feel, not to rush, but to remember, not to conquer, but to cherish, not to fear, but to waste in the only way that matters, with your whole heart wide open. If this touched your heart, even for a moment, slow down today, breathe deep, and remember, you don't always have to do more. Sometimes, you just need to be. Thank you for spending this time with BookTone. Subscribe if your soul feels at home here. And as always, take care of your time and let it take care of you.